Schwartz here from Sales for Nerds, kicking off the Sales for Nerds podcast. If you feel more comfortable with SQL than sales calls, more at home writing test suites than proposals, more interested in crunching numbers than shaking hands, if you think networking should be about routers rather than cocktails with strangers, if you're more interested in debating code editors than negotiating deals, but somehow you ended up responsible for some of those sales and marketing activities, this is the podcast for you.
Welcome. Today I'm excited to have Maura Thomas, who is an award-winning international speaker and trainer on both individual and corporate productivity, attention management, and work-life balance. She's a TEDx speaker. She's the founder of RegainYourTime.com and the author of both Personal Productivity Secrets and her new book, Work Without Walls, An Executive's Guide to Attention Management, Productivity, and the Future of Work. And I think maybe selfishly, I'm feeling like I want to delve into productivity. We were just talking with Jill Conrath about avoiding distractions, and now we've got Maura Thomas on talking about attention management. Welcome, Maura.
Thanks, Ruben. Happy to be here.
All right, let's get started with the important stuff. We have a 2014 Verada Tri-County Pinot Noir, partly from Sonoma, partly from Santa Barbara, partly from Monterey, and I knew this was going to work out well when Maura said, I'd like to have some California Pinot Noir. That's kind of my default go-to. So if you wouldn't mind, can you grab that Venturi, grab that aerator, and put it over the glass? There we go.
I'd like to note for the record that is the wine.
That is definitely the wine. That is not Maura. But what we found in testing is that it does impact the flavor of the wine, especially when you first open it. So it's a goofy sound. And I'm making a little bit of a mess on the table, but we'll clean that up at the end. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay.
Good wine.
I think we'll give this a few minutes. Even with the Venturi, I have a feeling it's going to open up a bunch. You never know when they've got a blend of grapes. Were they just trying to use up a bunch of stuff? Or are they creating something sublime? Or maybe both?
I'll take your word for it.
So, Maura, tell me, how did you get into being a productivity guru? I don't feel like that's something most of us grow up dreaming about.
I wish I did. I wish I could say that I was smart enough to know that like the speaking industry or the training industry was a thing. But I was not that smart. My first job out of college was for a company called Time. In the U.S., it was called Time Design. It's known as Time System in the rest of the world. And they sold paper-based planners and training to go along with them. Still do, actually. I believe that they are the best paper-based planner on the market. So a little shout out there to Time System. And I got a job there right out of college, and the U.S. was a small office. They had about 12 employees, and I think in my 10 years there, I held all 12 jobs, I think. And my last job there was director of marketing, where I was responsible for describing to people what we did there and why it was important, and how what we did there was better than what other people were teaching. And so in order to do that, I had to go to other trainings and see other speakers and read all the books and get really a very thorough education on the productivity market.
Okay, I want to delve deep into that in just a second, but I'm curious about the jump from I'm leaving college to I'm even just going to consider starting working at one of these. Like, did you use the planners in college, or how did you even come across these guys?
Kelly Temps.
Okay.
I was a Kelly girl. That's what they called them back then.
And so you happened to get assigned to this company.
I did, and it was a fun place. That's sort of how I made money through college, as I worked summers in offices.
Okay.
So it's how I got exposure to the business world and to learn how offices run. And then while I was there, Time System had a great education reimbursement program, so I got an MBA in my tenure there. And so I went in as a temp, and I came and I decided that I really liked it there. I really liked what they were doing. I had a real affinity for it. And so I decided I'm going to get myself hired. I got to figure out a way to get myself hired. And so I was the receptionist to the president. They called him the executive vice president. And I just found ways to be super useful. And I got hired.
Okay. Very cool. And so then you do everything. You become director of marketing, and you have to evaluate how this system compares So what kind of works or doesn't work when you try to think about these things?
Yeah, so I think some people come to a business like this because they're good at something. In fact, I think a lot of entrepreneurs come to a bit, right? That's the E-Myth idea, right? I'm really good at this, so I will open a business doing this.
Sure.
But with the productivity industry, what works for you might not work for everybody.
Right.
And it's true that there is no one system that works for really, really everyone, mainly because some people do it and some people don't. But I really do believe that there are foundational principles that work. And some people don't like to do them. Some people would prefer to work differently. But I don't agree with the idea that, it's custom and it's all depends on your profile and how you like to work. Because my clients come to me and say, well, don't you want to see how you like to work before you help us? How we like to work before you help us? And my response is, well, is the way you're working for you? Because I'm thinking it's not. That must be why you called me. And so if it's not, why would we start with a broken premise? So in my time doing this, I've discovered that there are systems that work. There are foundational principles that work and some that don't.
So what are some of the foundational principles that don't work?
Well, so that leads into my belief that time management is an outdated idea that doesn't work anymore. There was a time, perhaps. I mean, time management is really all about scheduling and some prioritizing. But I mean, the tool of time management is calendar, pretty much. Time management says if you're really serious about something, if you really want to make sure you do it, then you better put it on your calendar, because if it's on your calendar, it'll definitely get done. Well, in my experience, the first person most people break an appointment with is themselves, right? And so you can put it on your calendar all day long. It doesn't mean you're going to do it.
Okay. Although, is it fair to say that people who have their calendars filled with everything except what they say is important, that's definitely not going to get done either?
It could. I think that some people use appointments to avoid the things that they don't want to do. But usually, if somebody's avoiding something that they don't want to do, I mean, procrastination is a big problem for a lot of people. But a lot of times it's because they haven't really defined it well. They haven't broken it down, right? They have something on their list. I mean, I was even guilty of it. When my publisher came to me and asked me to write my first book, I wrote on my list, write book.
That sounds pretty straightforward.
That was, I avoided that and procrastinated on that for a long time. And so you really have to break it down. So even when I broke it down, okay, write chapter 1. Still not, I still didn't really know what that meant. So when you put something on your list, the odds that you will do it will go up if the words that you use on your list actually inspire action. So write chapter 1. Well, first you got to know what you're going to say in chapter 1, right? And you can't just pick up the pen. I mean, you can pick up the pen and start to write, and maybe that's a way to do it. But for me, I don't know what I'm going to write about, so I'm not going to do that right now.
Right.
Right. So for me, it came down to, it wasn't until I broke it down to write 3 main ideas for chapter 1. And so that to me was a starting point. Maybe for somebody else, they would still say, well, I still don't know what I'm going to write in chapter 1. But I think most people who are going to approach a book kind of know where it's going to start, right? So what are the 3 main points, especially if it's nonfiction, right? What are the 3 main points I want to get across in chapter 1?
Okay.
I really knew that.
Right.
So then, so those words, write 3 main points, that really inspired action. If you gave me a pen, I could do it. If you say something like, organize the meeting, what does that mean?
Right.
Organize is a word that I like to say it's an action verb, but it's not really an actionable verb.
Okay. I like that distinction.
Right. So it's, plan the event or implement the program, right? Those words make you go, I call them speed bumps, right? They make you go, I don't really know what that means, right? Because a speed bump is designed to slow you down.
Mm-hmm.
But for most people, if the speed bump doesn't go all the way to the side of the road, what do?
You just go around it.
You go around it, right? And it's the same thing. You're going to come to a word like that on your list, organize the meeting, and you're going to go, first you slow down. What is that really? I don't know. And you go around it, and you do the next thing on your list. So the odds go up that you will get something done if you use really specific words that actually inspire action in you. Like if everybody went away and left you alone right now, would you know exactly what to do? And if the answer is yes, then you are specific enough.
And so it's almost like if you get out of your own head, if your manager or boss or client told you this, would you know what to do? Or if you were outsourcing this or directing one of your employees to do it, would they know what to do? It's almost like you expect a level of clarity when you're interacting with other people. But when we make a set of instructions for ourselves, we're sometimes lazy.
Yes.
And we don't use, as you say it, actionable words. We use speed bump words like organize or plan or...
That's right. And I think that really is a symptom of the procrastination to begin with. It's the idea that I think everybody likes to be doing. It feels productive when we're doing something. You got to do. And because we have our phones and our tablets, we can always do something, right? But truthfully, taking time to stop and think is doing something. It's productive, but we don't really think of it as productive because, well, I'm just sitting there.
Right.
I'm not doing anything. I got to do something. And so we feel like taking time to stop and think is a luxury we can't afford. So we just write, plan the program because it's fast and I'll know what I meant and I'll take care of that later. But if you really stop and think, okay, what exactly do I need to do to plan the program? And then you get something on your list that really is actionable. Everything always breaks down to something, right? Even the biggest project always breaks down to, call Joe as the first step, right? It's always something. And so if you can get it to that point, then you can move even your biggest projects forward, even if you only have a couple of minutes.
That's a good point. So you're not sitting there thinking, gosh, I never made progress on this because you have a next action that's always available to you.
That's right.
It may or may not be 2 minutes long, but at least there's some chance that there's a next action that will fit into your available space.
That's right, which leads me into the next really bad time management advice, I think. It's actually not bad advice. It's just been corrupted to become bad advice. So there's this idea of the 2-minute rule.
Okay.
And the 2-minute rule is, if you can do it in 2 minutes or less, you should just do it. And I've seen so many articles lately that say that, like, oh, that's the fastest way to productivity. Anytime you think of something that'll just take you a couple minutes, just hammer it out, just get it right done. Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think of things that take 2 minutes or less all day long. Right?
Certainly more often than once every 2 minutes.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, have you ever been walking around the house and you're like, oh, I got to bring this upstairs. Oh, but before I do that, let me wash that dirty. Let me put those clothes away. And then you're like wandering around the house like a crazy person and you can't even remember the thought that, why am I upstairs? Right. Like you don't even remember how you got there.
That's pretty much my waking life, especially with 2 kids. And
so that's, oh, well, if I think of something, I should just do it. Well, that pretty much guarantees that you're just going to run around like a crazy person all day going, oh, but I got to do that. Oh, but then I got to do that. Oh, but before I do that, I got to do that. The only time to apply the 2-minute rule is during what I call processing time. And processing time is when you are, some people might call it getting organized, right? When you are thinking about your work, when you've downloaded your email and you're ready to tackle it, when you brought the mail in from the mailbox, right? You're opening the mail, you're looking at it. What is it? Do I need to keep it? What do I need to do with this stuff? That's all processing time. When you're thinking to yourself at your desk, what do I need to get done today? And you're making that list, that's processing time. During processing time, that's the time to apply the 2-minute rule. If you can think of it, it's going to take you a minute or two to write it on your list. So You might as well just do it. But during processing time, the goal is to finish processing, right? Get through the mail, get through those emails. Make your whole list, right? And if you just if you get sidetracked by things that take 5, 10, 15 minutes, then you never come back and finish processing. So the 2-minute rule is great, but only during processing time. And most people miss that piece.
Okay, got it. Now, processing makes me think of David Allen and getting things done.
Yes.
How closely aligned is your philosophy to his?
Yes. So I had the pleasure of working with David Allen early in my career. He too worked at Time Design when I first started there. I think he is a genius in productivity. I think of him sort of as the father or the grandfather of the industry. No offense, David. He's got amazing ideas. And many of the foundational principles that I learned as the time design process, David really had a hand in that. So we agree in many ways. I think he's really smart. I also think that he came out of the world of paper and note cards. And as those of us who are old enough, we all did. But when I sat down to write my book and when I started teaching my process, I thought, what is it that's hard about getting things done that maybe could be easier, especially now that we have all this different technology? And, is there a better way than note cards in your pocket and, and tickler files?
Right.
And the getting things done process, he calls it himself, it's like the black belt level, but maybe everybody doesn't need the black belt level. And so I agree with him in many fundamental ways. I also disagree in a fair number of ways. I think it's a little bit more complicated than it needs to be for everyone.
So just so we can stir things up a little bit, and if we ever get David to listen to this, we can have him come on and have some wine too and argue about why he's right.
You have to bring me back so that we can debate.
Okay. That sounds great. And I've listened to a number of his podcasts also. And, I think I try to follow the process somewhat, but it does feel sort of heavyweight. But I also feel like maybe I'm being lazy, and if I applied it better, it would work more easily. So tell me a little bit about where some of these disagreements lie.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily think that you need to do everything. I also think one of the biggest, difficulties with getting things done is that he doesn't apply it to, if you read the book, there's no application to any tools aside from the tickler files and the note cards and stuff. In fact, it's almost like he goes out of his way not to talk about any tools. And he's right. A good productivity methodology is tool agnostic. You should be able to use it on anything. However, figuring out how to apply the methodology to a tool is too much for most people on their own. So I do think that there needs to be some instruction for people to get started. Like, okay, this whole methodology is great, but how do I apply it to, my smartphone and my Outlook that I use at work, or my Google Mail or whatever? Figuring that out is too much. So I think that's something that, maybe 20% of my training is about teaching people how to apply the methodology to whatever tools they happen to be using. I think his idea of contexts is a little bit outdated because, when he wrote the book, he was absolutely right. We didn't all have a smartphone. We didn't all have the internet. We didn't all have laptops. Right. And so you needed different lists, next to action calls, next actions, at my computer, next actions in the car or whatever. But we don't need those anymore. And I think that it just unnecessarily complicates your system. For example, those are a couple of the most major. I think he goes into a lot of detail. Thank you.
Let me just give you a little more wine here. It's starting to open up a little bit, I think.
Thank you. I think his ideas are sound, and I absolutely learned a lot from my time at Time Design and my time learning from him. I was sort of hoping that his latest book would be a little bit more heavy on instruction and a little bit more technology focused, but I was disappointed that it wasn't.
I remember listening to a podcast recently where he did talk all about tools and whatnot. And I think part of the challenge is, especially with the app stores and all that, there's like every year there's like 300 new apps to be more productive. There
are. But the thing about a great methodology is that if you have the methodology, you know what you need in a tool. And so it doesn't matter. People are like, how do you keep up with all the tools? I don't really need to keep up with all the tools because, I've got a handful. If you're a PC user, I can help you. If you're a Mac user, I can help you. If you're a Google user, I can help you. And that's pretty much like if you come to me and you've already got the tools that you love, you're probably doing okay. Like the reason that I think most people don't use tools well is because they don't have the methodology and they just rely on the tool. Like I got this app and it's supposed to change my life, but it, I put a few things in it and I never used it again.
Now I have 500 to-dos and
Right.
I'm really stressed out.
Right. And so it's really about the methodology more than it is the tool. But the tool is important too.
Okay, so we started off talking about attention management, and then I kind of sidetracked you into why time management is bad.
Yeah, I don't.
Let's go back to attention management. What's the difference between attention management and time management?
Yeah. So as I said, I think time management is an outdated idea because life is too complicated for schedules and, ABC. It's time management advice says make your list every morning and then prioritize your list A, B, C, D. And then if it's really important, make some appointments in your calendar. But as soon as you check your email, that list is out the window, and the list has gotten longer and longer and longer. And then you go to meetings, and everything changes. And so that advice so time management advice really doesn't take enough of account and take enough into consideration the distractions we have now. Because not only do we have the external distractions from the internet and from our technology and from our devices and all that kind of stuff, but the internet has also trained us, because we not only have the internet, but we have the internet in our pocket, right? Mm-hmm. We have the world at our fingertips. We've been trained to know that there's no wondering anymore, right? So you interrupt yourself because you're trying to think about something and you're like, well, let me just look that up. Is that true? Should I, right? And then you realize you pull out your phone to check that fact on your browser, but then there's a text just came in, and then while you're responding to the text, you get an email, and then the phone rings, and then right, and then you're like, why did I pull out my phone? And then you're watching cat videos before you, right?
It all goes back to the cat videos somehow.
It does. And so how you manage your time is only relevant to the extent that you also devote your attention. Because even if you do say, at 9 o'clock, I'm definitely going to do that thing, but you pull up that thing at 9 o'clock and then you think about it for a minute, and then the phone rings, and then you go back to it, and then you get a text message, and then you go back to it, and then somebody interrupts you, and then you go back to it, and then you're like, oh, let me just check that fact before I put it in this proposal. Let me check it on the internet, and then it's cat videos, right? Because the job of the internet is to keep you on the internet.
Right.
Right. And so it's really difficult so simple time management advice just doesn't equip us to deal with that. So attention management is much more important. And I think even just thinking about, I need to manage my time better. What does that even mean? You can't control time, right? You have the same amount of hours. We all know this, right? Everybody's been saying since the dawn of time, you can't manage time. You can only manage yourself. But what part of yourself? It's your attention. If you can't control your attention, then the things that you do will either not get done, they'll take longer to get done, the quality will be much lower. That's what the studies show us. And so even just changing your frame of mind to attention management instead of time management, I think helps, because then okay, I got to control my attention. I have this thing to get done. I need to, and my recommended path to attention management is 3 areas. Control your environment, right? You have something you need to get done. You have to give the message to your coworkers, please don't interrupt me, right? However you get that message across. Wear a sign on your back, put headphones on, close your office door, whatever you need to do, but you need to get the message out, please do not disturb me. So you have to control your environment, even if you work at home, right?
Right.
You got to put the dog out. You got to close the door. You got to close the window so you don't hear the neighbors, buzzsaw or whatever. Control your environment. Second, you have to control your technology, right? If your emails and all your notifications and all that stuff is always coming up, then you are not controlling your attention, and you're going to get distracted, and that thing won't get done. So you have to shut off the notifications. I mean, and I love, it cracks me up that people, that people have notifications to tell them about email. Right? Do you really?
It's like the worst thing ever.
Well, but do you need a notification to tell you that you have new mail? I mean, let me just end the suspense for you right now. You have new mail, right? So you can just shut off all those notifications and just assume that you have mail all the time. You do. There's mail, right?
Well, I want to know what horrible person in charge of all the email systems, Outlook, Gmail, whatever, the default setting is to notify you.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of our behaviors around email are holdovers from when email was brand new.
It was very exciting to get an email.
It was exciting, and you got, 5 a day.
Right.
And so it was fine. It's no big deal. Now that you get 200 a day, it's same thing with Reply All. Reply All used to be this cool thing where it was like, wow, I can have a conversation with all these people, and people can chime in whenever it's convenient for them, and right. But now Reply All is like the bane of everybody's existence, right? And we have other ways to have group conversations. Reply All should not be one of them, but it's a holdover. So our habits haven't evolved. So control your environment, control your technology, shut off all those notifications, put your phone on do not disturb, airplane mode, whatever, go offline, do whatever you need to do. And then the third thing is you have to control your own behavior, which is the hardest part. Right? Because we're so conditioned that even though there's nothing interrupting us, we're like, hey, why isn't there anything interrupting us? We interrupt ourselves, right? Why is the server down? Why haven't I gotten an email? Right? Or like, how come nobody's called me? Does the phone work? Hello? Right? And so the problem is that our environments have eroded our attention span to such a point where we really have no attention span anymore. We have a few minutes go by and it's too quiet and everybody's like, ooh, this feels weird, right? And so that's the bad news, is that we've essentially conditioned ourselves into this state of constant distraction, which is the bad news. The good news is we can now condition ourselves out of it. If you recognize it, you can do things that, instead of eroding your attention span and your ability to focus, they actually build up and strengthen your ability to focus and lengthen your attention span.
Okay, what are those? Those sound good.
Yes, those are good.
Turn off email notifications, number one.
Yeah, well, you'll never get to that point if you don't first control your environment and control your technology. Okay. You have to create those boundaries for sometimes. And people, when I'm delivering training or speaking to audiences, they say like, oh, I just can't get away from this. Everybody's always looking for me. Well, I understand that, but how about, 15 minutes every hour or the first 2 hours of the day or something where for the majority of time you are available for all those interruptions and all those people who want you, but you have a little bit of time for yourself to get your own work done. I mean, is that really unreasonable? Right? It can't be. If you have stuff to do, it can't be unreasonable. So use timers. That's a great way to start to build up your attention span. And it's a great way to overcome procrastination as well. Whenever there's something I don't want to do, I set a timer for some amount of time that feels really manageable. Like I did this with exercise. Studies show that you should not tell yourself that you hate to exercise, because that just makes it even harder. So I'm still guilty of that. I really don't like to exercise. I really don't. But what I did was I decided, take my own advice, set a timer, and I said, okay, because there's all these, you can do this in 10 minutes and this workout in 30 minutes. That still felt like a really long time for me.
Okay.
So I started out by saying, how about 60 seconds? What if I just did like push-ups for 60 seconds, as many push-ups as I can do, a minute, right? And so I did that for a week, just a minute, right? Because I felt like I could do anything for a minute. And then I'll tell you what, maybe my heart rate didn't get into the, fat burning zone and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the week, I was doing more push-ups than I was at the beginning of the week.
Right.
So it worked a little bit, right? And then the next week it was 2 minutes and I did push-ups and sit-ups, right? And then the next week it was 3 minutes. And now I'm happy to say that I'm up to a 30-minute routine every day. So using a timer can help you to build up your attention span and to overcome procrastination. But just say, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to do just this thing and only this thing. Shut off control your environment, control your technology. Only this thing is the only thing I have access to, and this is all I'm going to do for the next, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20, whatever number sounds doable to you. And the more you do that, the more you'll feel comfortable with that level of focus and the easier it will be. So the ability to focus is like any other skill. If you practice, you get better.
Right.
Right. So that's one way. Another way is meditation is the ultimate form of controlling your attention. Right.
Trying to, at least.
Right. And meditation sounds really hard for people, but there are many apps that help you to introduce just a little bit of mindfulness into your day. A minute, 2 minutes, right? Goes back to that timer idea. I guess I could sit still for a minute, could I sit? I mean, if you can't sit still for a minute, you have to kind of look at yourself and be like, all right, something might be really wrong here. But if you can introduce a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes of mindfulness into your day, once, twice a day, then you learn. I mean, the idea of meditation is to learn to think about what you're thinking about, right? Where's my mind? Where do I want it to be? Let me pull it back to where I want it to be. So that has all kinds of benefits for, I think it's a component in emotional intelligence. Because when you start to recognize what thoughts you're having, then it helps you to regulate your communication and control your emotions. And wow, I'm feeling angry right now. Why am I feeling angry? What am I going to do about the fact that I'm feeling angry, right? It's different than just lashing out and we don't even know why, which is what happens to a lot of people.
It's kind of amazing to me that we spend so much time sort of on our bodies and, you know, are we eating right and exercising and so on, and so much on our sort of our intellect, right? Can I answer 1 + 1 = 2? Can I, you know, identify this vocabulary? But the notion of how our mind actually works, we ignore that. We don't think we need to bother to train it.
Right, because it's my mind and I should be able to control it. But the fact is that our brains are not at all obedient, right? They're not at all obedient. I mean, the one thing that you want to think of, right? If you could just reach into your mind and pluck out the exact thing that you needed at exactly the moment that you needed it, then that would be great. But everybody knows that your brain doesn't work that way. In fact, the time that you want something is actually the time that you will never be able to pull it out of your brain, right? What is that person's name? Or there was something I wanted to tell you, or, you know, oh, that guy's coming toward me at this event. What's his name?
Right.
What's his name? Right? All that kind of stuff. And I mean, just as simple as, you know, if I told you don't think about a penguin.
Here we go. Thanks.
Right.
Antarctica, here we come.
Right. And they call them earworms, right? You've ever heard the songs? I saw a clip of a horrible clip of Donald Trump singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" this morning. And
seriously?
You're welcome.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I might have to edit that out because I don't know if I can inflict that on everybody.
But I've had that stupid song in my head all day now, and no matter how many times I tell myself, don't think about that song, it doesn't work. Right? So
Thanks for sharing. Really appreciate it.
Happy to bring you into my frustration. So your brain is not obedient, and you really have not a lot of control over it, and that's what meditation is about. And I'll give a shout out to local professor. You should have him on your show. He's great. Dr. Art Markman.
Okay.
He wrote a book called He wrote 2 books, Smart Thinking and Smart Change. Smart Change is all about behavior change. I know a lot about I learned a lot about what I know about behavior change from Dr. Markman.
Okay.
But his idea of writing Smart Thinking, he said, because everybody has a brain and I believe they should all know how to use it. That's why he wrote Smart Thinking.
Sounds like a good place to start, right?
Yes. He's a psychology professor. So you're right. We don't give as much credence to our mental state as perhaps we should. Our intellect, you're right, but not our mental state.
And I think our intellect kind of deceives us. We want to think that our brain is a computer that rationally serves us when it evolved for completely different purposes. And then we get frustrated that it seems to not be doing what we want. So real specifically, are there mindfulness or meditation apps that you use?
Yes. My favorite one is called Buddhify.
Okay.
Buddhify. And the thing that I love the most about Buddhify is that it gives you an array of situations. I'm taking a break from work. I'm trying to get to sleep. I'm just waking up. I'm feeling anxious. Whatever situation you're in, and then you choose that situation, then it gives you an option, an array of small guided meditations to choose from for that situation, anywhere from a minute or 2 up to 20, 25, 27 minutes. So you can pick whichever one you have enough time for, whatever mood you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a couple just meditations. They're relevant for any circumstance. So that's my favorite one. Another one that I use is Calm. Calm.com. But it combines that idea of short, using a timer. You just tell yourself, I could do this for a minute or 2, right? Helps to get you over that. It's called activation intention, right? As soon as you get started, you're more likely to continue. Right. But getting started is the hardest part. And so that timer helps get you over that hump of, I'll do that later, right?
Okay. I started using Headspace a few years ago.
Headspace is another really common one, yeah.
And for me, it was the notion of, I can do this in 10 minutes. which I think is the shortest time they have.
10 minutes is a long time if you're just getting started.
But I thought I needed 30 minutes. And for some reason, that was a big obstacle in my head. And I knew the aphorism, right? If you don't have 30 minutes a day to meditate, you need to spend an hour.
Yeah.
But I was like, 10 minutes, there's no reason I can't spend 10 minutes.
Right.
And then I was surprised that I actually got a benefit out of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
now I've gone crazy. I've gone all the way to 15 minutes.
Wow.
But it definitely helps.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we want to manage our attention. We want to sort of know what we're doing inside our own head.
Yes.
How does that kind of tie back to what am I going to do today? And how do I handle all these things that do come up that are going to throw me off course? Because it's no matter how much I try to manage my environment, some things are going to be outside my control.
Yes. So this is another place actually where I disagree with David Allen, right? He'll say, if I can paraphrase, my understanding is that he'll say anything that you could do, should do, want to do, need to do can go on your next action list. And I find that to be a little bit overwhelming. And in theory, like, yes, they could all be next actions. But the way that I suggest that people prioritize is by due date. Mm-hmm. So you ask yourself, by when would I like to have this done? And you have to make that a manageable number a day. And everybody thinks that they're going to get way more done than they will. And the truth is, you will do a lot of things during the day, but most of them you didn't know about yesterday.
Right.
Right. And so so my suggestion to people is, if you have your next action list, put only 3 things a day, because you'll do many other things, but 3 things that you knew about yesterday means that your important work is moving forward. And when I say 3 things, I mean 3 next actions, right?
Okay.
So that'll ensure that your important work is moving forward because you're taking action on those things, but it still gives you the flexibility and the space in your day to deal with email and to go to the meetings and to do all of the other stuff that comes up that you have to get done. And still move your important objectives forward, get your important stuff done. And it ensures that you spend at least some time in your day being proactive instead of reactive.
Right. Okay. So I think a lot of times we sort of have this notion of, I'm going to spend 40 hours on my most important thing. Well, except for these 5 hours of meetings and these other 6 hours of meetings, and I forgot about lunch, and I'd really like to exercise, and then this thing came up, and then you get to the end of the week and you haven't spent any hours really doing it.
Yes.
And you're saying, if I could just spend 10 hours that I knew that I could actually deliver on, at least I would move things forward somewhat.
And you'll still stay on top of all the other stuff. And I mean, that's another common mistake that most people make, is that they aren't realistic about their day. So for example, most people have, my clients at least, I find that it's common in companies for people to have somewhere between 3 to 5 hours of meetings a day. If you have a job, if you go to an office, for a lot of people, that's pretty reasonable. So let's call it 4, right? You've got 4 hours of meetings a day. And also, in my experience, most professionals get around 100 email messages a day. About 100.
Pretty lucky.
So, well, once you filter out the newsletters and the system generated and the I'm out of the office today and all that kind of stuff, right? Maybe 100 left. And if you figure about 100 messages, and every message takes about 2 minutes to just sort of read, and what is this, and how does it relate to me, and what do I need to do, and all that kind of stuff. So about 2 minutes. So that's 200 minutes of work that you have.
I hope you're not planning to eat lunch, right?
Right. So now we're at 200 minutes. That's 3 hours and 20 minutes, right?
Plus my 4 hours of meetings.
Plus your 4 hours of meetings. So now you're over 7 hours and you haven't done anything else.
You haven't even gone to the bathroom.
Right. That's right. Right. And I don't know about you, but every time I go to a meeting, I come out of the meeting with more stuff to do. Right. And so most people are wildly unrealistic about what's going to happen in a day. You know, you ask somebody and they've got, every opening, because time management says put an appointment on your calendar. So any open space they've taken with a task. I'll do that at 2, and I'll do that at 2:30, and I'll do that at 3. And so they've got all these meetings, and then they fill in all the space between the meetings with all their tasks. And then they just expect that email is just something that they'll squeeze in like in between or during, which is how most people do it, during, right? I'll just, as the emails come in, I'll just try to stay on top of those. And so the process that most people have for email is what I call skim and skip.
Right.
Right. I'm just going to skim through looking for anything that's really fast or really urgent or that I can just get rid of right now. Mm-hmm. And then everything else, I'll deal with it later.
Right.
But then the problem is later never comes. And so then you end up with tens or hundreds or thousands of messages that you've marked as unread to get back to later, or put a flag on it that you'll get back to it later. Right. A flag on your email is like the worst thing to me, because a flag on your email is just enough to make you stress about it. Okay. Right? It's like, I don't know what it is. I don't know how long it's going to take me. I don't know how important it is. I just know there's something I need to do. Something. I don't know what.
So what should you do with those emails?
Well, the first step is that you have to set aside time. You have to recognize that for most people, email is work. Email is part of your job.
So do you put that in your calendar, like email processing?
No, but you factor it in the same way that you do with like your commute or your lunch or your shower, right? You sort of look at your day and you go, okay, well, I'm going to need time in there to do those things, right? It's the same with email. I'm going to need to, maybe not every day, but every 3 days, right? You need to have some time to deal with those messages. And if it's 3 hours and 20 minutes a day, but you can't do any of it today, you're going to have pretty much a full day of email tomorrow.
Right.
Right? And so you have to plan for that. And most people don't.
So Elon Musk, if you're listening, get those self-driving cars here so we can drive ourselves even more crazy by doing our email during our commute, right?
Right.
And put a shower in there while you're at it so we can get everything done.
Right. Which is another great point, though, about that space for thinking time and about that mindfulness, right? Because our ideas and our space for thinking used to happen in the in-between moments, right? The driving or the walking from the parking lot into the building or waiting in line, right? We would just have these moments where we couldn't do anything else, so we were just left alone with our thoughts. Well, now we don't have to be alone with our thoughts anymore because we have our devices to entertain us.
Right.
And so, well, I've got 60 seconds before the stoplight changes, or maybe 3 minutes because I'm not going to make it for the first 2 times at the light. So I could knock off, 10 emails in this 3 minutes before the light changes, right? And so now all those in-between moments of thinking time and inspiration, right? People tell me I have my best ideas in the shower, right? It's because there are no interruptions in the shower, and you can't. Well, now that the phones are waterproof, I think that's going to go away too. So you have to have that space where your brain can do the work that it's good at without your interference, right? Just let your mind wander a little bit, mull over things that you've heard or things that you've learned or ideas that you have, and sort of flesh them out a little bit in your head. But all that time is gone.
Yeah, it's an issue. And then I notice I've been guilty of this at times when I'm not being mindful of it, right? I'll start checking my phone when I'm supposed to be hanging out with my family.
Right.
Let me just check this one thing, and then it balloons into all these other things and so on. And
oh, absolutely. And it's not even, there's like the accidental time when that happens, but there's also the purposeful. Have you ever been out with like a group of people, whether it's family or friends, and somebody says something and you're like, that's not true. I don't think you're right about that. Let me check that. Right? And so then you're like lost in your phone. And then because you're lost in your phone, the people you're with pull out their phones. And then before you know it, it's, descended into chaos.
Yeah. So let's go back to your book.
Okay.
Because you started out saying, gosh, this was actually really hard for me. And then you broke it up into your 3 main ideas for chapter 1. How did the rest of it go once you got that sort of the ball rolling down the hill a little bit? Yeah.
So for me, it was maybe a little bit easier than for some people because I was teaching all of this stuff. And so I knew the content that was going in the book, right? So for me, it was write the 3 main points of each chapter. Okay. So the next action was 3 main points of chapter 1. The next action was 3 main points of chapter 2, and so on. And then here are these 3 main points. I've already written. I have a lot of stuff already done about these 3 main points. So then it was just copy and paste into one document, right? Take everything I've already written and copy and paste it into a document. And so now I've got the raw material for chapter 1. And so then it was just to edit the document, which is a lot easier than edit. Always sounds easier than write.
Right.
Right. So, and then even if it was, 20 pages of rambling stuff, I would say, well, edit the first 2 pages.
right.
of chapter 1 or edit for 10 minutes.
Right.
And so then it still felt manageable and pretty easy. And well, it's only 10 minutes. But again, it's that activation intention. Once I got my head into chapter 1, an hour was gone before I even knew it. So I also think really good advice, and I'm not sure if you asked about this because you're planning a book and you would like help with that, but
no, not yet. I'm sure I'll put that on my to-do list at some point,
but to me, at least one great editor is a must, because you can't get out of your own way, and it makes perfect sense to you.
Right.
And then you turn it over to your editor and they're like, I have no idea what you're saying right now.
Right.
And you're like, how can you not know? It's clear as a bell. Right. So that helps a lot. And then when you get it back to from your editor, then again, it's just editing.
Right. And I guess I'm trying to sort of apply what you took. It was a very complex task with a lot of steps that can stump anybody, but you kind of broke it down into smaller tasks, and even things like we talked about at the beginning, like plan the company meeting. Right. Well, that's a nebulous task, but take last year's company meeting slides, review how we did our commitments, talk to so-and-so, get feedback, and determine what went well, what didn't go well from last year's company meeting. It's that we can go do. Right.
And you could come up with, for something like that, you could come up with all kinds of just tiny little, call the hotel, see if they're available on the date, right? Or, or draft the menu, or, draft the agenda, whatever. There's all these tiny little steps that can all go on your list, but each of them individually usually is pretty quick. And so whether you have 2 minutes or 2 hours to get things done, you can actually move those big things forward.
Makes a lot of sense. By the way, this wine is starting to taste really delicious in my opinion.
It's good stuff.
Even with the aerator, I feel like it was a little bit closed in at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'm making you talk the whole time, so this is very unfair to my guests. I lure them here with wine, and then I kind of sip my wine the whole time, and they have to share their wisdom. So I don't know if that's a good deal, but...
He's drunk. No.
Have to drive home. Have to pace myself very carefully today. Now, if we did this over Skype, when I'm at my home office, that would be a different story.
Right. That's different.
So what else should people think about if they're about to get off their commute or their run or treadmill or whatever, and they know that they face some of these issues? Control their environment, control their technology, control their behavior. What else do they need to do that's going to help them actually control their attention?
Well, there are many ways to begin to control your attention, your behavior. So that's sort of a big topic on its own, in addition to timers and meditation and becoming aware of what you're paying attention to. That's sort of a lifelong learning journey. And you get all kinds of benefits from that I think you can't predict in advance.
Very interesting. Do you want to share any examples with us?
Well, I mean, it's whether you call it meditation or whether you're actually meditating or whether you're just taking space for daydreaming or prayer or whatever it is for you, but just quiet time. I think you tend to find you end up being a little bit more introspective. I think you end up learning a little bit more about yourself. When you can learn to think about what you're thinking about, like I said, it makes your communication better, because you're having this conversation and all of a sudden you recognize that you're angry, or you recognize that you're offended, and instead of just, most people don't recognize it first, they just react to whatever's happening. And if you recognize it first, then you can sort of plan your response. Should I be angry? What kind of response is appropriate here?
Or am I angry because of something else and I'm redirecting it to someone who has nothing to do with why I'm angry?
Exactly. And so then your communication improves, which means your relationships improve, which means that your emotional intelligence goes up, right? Your EQ goes up.
And your life gets better.
I mean, really, the studies show that EQ is a big predictor of success. And so, recognizing and being able to regulate yourself, your emotions, your communication and your emotions, it's a big component to emotional intelligence, and meditation brings you that.
Right. As I try to tell my kids sometimes, right, when they get upset about something because someone else is, usually their sibling is saying something to them or whatever. I'm like, well, if you're really mad at them, why are you letting them control how you are?
Right. Oftentimes we engage in behaviors in order to get a reaction out of somebody else. Right. And so when you recognize that that's what you're doing, then you have an opportunity to improve your relationships. So now we're sort of getting down I think now we've had too much wine. Now we're becoming armchair psychologists. But yeah, I mean, after that, if you learn to control your attention, then to me, that's the path to living a life of choice. So we were talking at the beginning, you and I were talking before we got started, that everyone everyone wants your attention, right? Every marketer in the world is trying to steal your attention, and that's no knock on marketers, but that's what the job is, right? Attention is the most valuable commodity now, because somebody's never going to do business with you if they've never heard of you, right? So you have to get their attention first. So attention is the most valuable commodity, which means that on the flip side of that, your only defense against everyone out there who wants your attention is to learn how to control your attention. Otherwise, you're living a life of reaction.
Right.
And if you've ever, how a day can go by where, I thought I was going to get all this stuff done, and now it's 5:00 and I didn't do any of it.
Never happened to me. That must be frustrating.
I know. Somebody else must have been telling me that. But those days add up into weeks, into months, into years. And if you've ever found yourself saying, man, I still haven't started that book, or man, I haven't gotten that promotion yet, or haven't moved to that new state that I planned, or haven't taken that family vacation, or if you've ever said to a friend, holy cow, how long has it been since we've talked?
Right.
Then you know that controlling your attention can actually mean that your life is not, if you don't control your attention, it might result in your life not being on the path that you intended.
It's because someone else is controlling it.
That's right. Because you're just sort of blowing in the breeze of reaction and getting your own plans kind of buried. And so to me, it really, controlling your attention and this idea of productivity, the definition of productivity that I use is achieving or producing a significant amount or result.
Okay.
That's a definition of productive, right? Achieving or producing a significant amount or result. So to me, it's about significant results. And so how productive you are is how much progress you have made on the results that are significant to you, whatever those results might be. And so we have professional results, but we also have personal results. Like, what do you want to do in this life? What do you want to do in your time on this planet? And so the ability to control your attention and your action, which is where the whole workflow methodology comes in, helps you to live a life of choice and to bring your unique gifts to the world in a way that makes you excited and motivated instead of a way that makes you exhausted and stressed.
Right. Very nice. That's a very good point. And I think one of the challenges that we have now for most of human history, entertainment and material things were very limited. And now for most of the people who are going to be listening to this, they're not infinite, but they're far more than we can deal with.
They might as well be infinite.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But our time and our attention is very infinite, both on a daily basis and a lifetime basis.
Yeah, very, very finite, you mean?
Very finite, yes. Maybe I have had too much wine.
Yes.
Yeah. Like we can't get more of it. We can get more of almost anything else except time and attention.
Yeah. A lot of people think that the idea of being productive it's about making the best use of the resources that you have available to you. But the most important resources that you have are not time and they're not money. The most important resources that you have are your body and your mind. And so if you don't control your attention in a way that allows you to be mindful and to be thoughtful and to approach your life with intention, then it doesn't matter how much money or how much time you have.
Right. I don't know who told me this, but I really like the analogy of it's not so much about how far up the ladder you get. Is your ladder on the right wall?
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it.
Right? Like so many people are so busy climbing a ladder and they get up there and they're like, wait a second, what am I doing up here? This is the wrong wall.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people achieve professional success and that was their goal, but they achieve it at the expense of their family or their health or their hobbies or, or all the other parts of their life. And if that's, if that's where you end up, is that really what you intended?
Sure. Well, Maura, I know that your time is very precious. So thanks so much. And it's been a great pleasure. And hopefully I will be able to take some of this advice, and hopefully it'll be useful for some other folks as well.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.